Hello and welcome to our new series, Reality Bites. Every week, we'll take you right to the heart of the big story and bring you the news behind the headlines. On our first episode, this week's big story, Nepal, a country shaken, shocked and in turmoil by the massacre of its royal family.
The king is dead. Long live the king.
The man who was adulated by millions when he was alive was cremated without a single family member by his side. If Nepal's royal family is to be believed, 30-year-old Birendra, then crown prince, had in one cruel stroke eliminated the king, the queen, his younger brother and at least 7 other members of his own family. The question of anyone attending his funeral simply did not arise. But as the flames consumed the body of the young prince, who was anointed king for all of one day, Nepal was still shaking its head in disbelief. Everyone who knew Birendra said he was a gentleman and a modernist, a man who wanted to make the monarchy and the palace more progressive, a man who was always smiling. How could he have turned suddenly into a trigger-happy monster? Perhaps only this woman has the answer. Devyani Rana, the woman who may have been Queen of Nepal had Birendra lived. In Nepal's elite circles, they tell you in hushed whispers that it was really Birendra's mother, Queen Aishwarya, who stood between her son and the woman he wanted for his bride. The reasons for the Queen's hatred seem straight out of a masala Hindi film. And if gossip in Kathmandu has any stamp of truth, Queen Aishwarya was a modern-day stepmother to Devyani's Cinderella. It all goes back in time. Nepal's powerful Rana family is split into 2 clans, the Chandra Shamsher and the Yuddha Shamsher faction, bitterly opposed to each other. Murders, poisonings and palace takeovers between the two have been common. Queen Aishwarya was a descendant of the Yuddha Shamsher clan, her would-be daughter-in-law and offspring of the enemy. But there are apparently more banal motivations as well. It is said that Devyani's father was once asked if he would marry the king's sister, but the sister was rejected for not being pretty enough. And the age difference between Devyani and Birendra was considered improper. Devyani was apparently a month older than the crown prince. Reasons that seem archaic and unreal to the outsider, but Nepal is a country where democracy was born only 10 years ago. Before that, the monarchy had unbridled powers, and royalty lived, as it still does, by its very own rules. The massacre could in fact have a strong impact on the future of the monarchy in Nepal. Here's what we found on the streets of Kathmandu. Kathmandu almost came to a standstill this past week. Continuous curfews and no cars on the road. Well, here we are right outside the main international airport in Kathmandu, and at this point we're having to walk the entire stretch of distance from the airport right into the city. That's at least a minimum of 3 kilometers, all because at every crossroads there are small mobs, small but very, very angry mobs who are saying that they want answers as to just who pulled the trigger, and they've stopped all traffic at this point, and it's anticipated that curfew could be imposed in the city at any moment. Even as we hit the track along with scores of stranded passengers, at the other end of town, Nepal's new ruler is taking charge. King Gyanendra, a nature lover and businessman who suddenly finds himself at the helm of a country that does not seem to want him as its ruler.
ज्यादा चाहते हैं, लेकिन हम ज्ञानेंद्र नहीं चाहता।
ज्ञानेंद्र नहीं
नहीं
चाहते।
चाहता।
क्यों नहीं चाहते? क्यों नहीं चाहते ज्ञानेंद्र को?
वो हमको अच्छा नहीं लगता है। क्यों
अच्छा।
चाहता है?
वो 2 नंबर ही है, तस्करी है वो।
लेकिन परिवार में ज्ञानेंद्र को छोड़ के तो कोई बचा ही नहीं।
यही तो इसलिए तो कोई नहीं चाहता कि परिवार में सब जब घटना हुआ, घर में एक रूम में घटना हुआ, तो राज परिवार का सब खत्म होना चाहिए। वो बीच में कैसे हो गया ऐसा?
मतलब आप कह रहे हैं वो कैसे बच गया?
कैसे बच गया?
आप लोगों को यह आशंका है कि वो कैसे बच गया?
उसका परिवार बच गया, उसका बेटा बच गया।
एक ही करके बोले, आप बोले।
उसका परिवार है ना,
हाँ,
बीबी बच गया, बेटा बच गया, उसका सब अपना जो था ना
ज्ञानेंद्र का।
ज्ञानेंद्र का वो बच गया। उसका लड़का पारस है ना, वो देश का हराम आदमी है।
For a country that has traditionally worshipped the throne as an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, the criticism of the new king is close to blasphemy. Even after the people's movement forced King Birendra to usher in parliamentary democracy in 1990, the royal family is firmly imprinted onto the collective consciousness of Nepal. These voices of protest are almost radical. It's a near schizophrenic reaction here. On one hand, a national upsurge of feeling for the monarchy as represented by King Birendra. On the other hand, so far at least, wild and unfounded allegations that the king's brother, Gyanendra, may have had a hand in the massacres. And the hostility towards the new order has taken on an ominously violent form. Young men barely in their 20s have flooded the streets and are locked into a pitched battle with the police. अब क्या हुआ? ये क्या है? ये गोली ये गोली है जो पुलिस के गन से लगी है। हाँ? अच्छा ये बताएं कैसे?
हम ये ज्ञानेंद्र सरकार मुर्दाबाद।
विद सरकार
ज्ञानेंद्र सरकार मुर्दाबाद।
ज्ञानेंद्र
मुर्दाबाद। हम राजनीति आई हेट पॉलिटिक्स।
You hate politics. अच्छा, are you against ज्ञानेंद्र? You don't. आप ज्ञानेंद्र का राजा बनाना चाहते हैं? As we weave our way through the angry mobs, we have to be extremely careful about where it is safe to film. The Indian media is hated right now, almost as violently as the new king. Well, we've been walking for more than an hour now. It's been an hour since we left the international airport and we're still nowhere close to our hotel. We've actually had to take a number of detours into narrow lanes like this one to avoid the wrath of angry mobs. Actually, at some street corners, people have been very friendly. But as everybody points out, in situations like this, it takes very little to whip up anti-India sentiments. These sentiments are, of course, already on display. People allege that Indian news organizations were quick to label the Crown Prince as the murderer before any evidence or any concrete evidence was available on hand.
Nepal is swamped by Indian satellite television. In that, what do you see? Essentially, you have journalists who don't really know Nepal, who don't know the complexities of the situation. What is the relationship between the royal palace and the government? What is the relationship between the opposition left, for example, in this present instance, and Girija Prasad Koirala? What was the history to all of this? There is very little of that backgrounding, so you just come in and you see hangama in the streets and you cover that. And Nepal becomes two-dimensional. Whereas Nepal is one of the most complex countries in South Asia.
जब नेपाल का इंडिया का विमान अपहरण हुआ था, उस वक्त भी नेपाल के लोग ने उस अपहरण करने में नेपाल के लोग शामिल होने का झूठी बात उसने कही था। उसके बाद भी बहुत से ऐसे प्रकरण हैं।
But perhaps the problem is not so much with the media, but how the palace and the government handled the massacre. Within hours of taking over, the new king described the massacre as an accident, an explanation no one was willing to buy. To the people, the attempt later to swing the needle of suspicion on Prince Dipendra smelt inevitably of a cover-up. Calling the massacre an accident was perhaps the new king's worst mistake. But he was genuinely hemmed in by legality as well. In Nepal, the law does not permit the king to be prosecuted. So once Dipendra had been anointed king, it would have been impossible to order any investigation against him, at least until he was declared dead.